Hello. Hopefully you are able to hear and see me again today. We are starting our second live call for the Fall Childproof Parenting course. I am Melissa, as you know. I see somebody else has jumped in, so I would love to know who else is here. I know Pam, I did receive your question, so I'm going to answer that. And I have one other question, but I don't know who it was from because I could not identify your email. So up until this point, we've really focused on laying the foundation for the next 3 weeks. So we've talked about you, your self-care, your partners, and your parenting experience. We've talked about what your kids are doing. So we did start to transition a little bit about kids and talking about what they're doing and some of the things that are driving you crazy. And a few of you have jumped in and shared. I hope that those of you that didn't share are able to empathize with these things that others are experiencing, because what I find is that everybody is having this shared experience. So we talked about what they're doing. We talked a little bit about why they're doing some of these things, because I think understanding can help you to be calmer and more patient and more present when some of this crazy stuff is happening. And we also talked about the importance of play, and play is so essential to your child's development, not just now. Like, now is very important, and it's kind of the key element to learning for a toddler or preschooler, but play throughout our lives. So my hope is that not only did you think about play for your child, but also how play fits in your life as well. So this is really the foundational pieces of the program. And now we're going to jump into the real exciting stuff. And that is discipline and emotion coaching. And we've got 3 weeks of it. And I've already received questions that really are going to be answered in the last few weeks. But I've tried to answer those as we've gone along as well. I see that somebody else just popped in as well. So if you wouldn't mind saying hello and letting me know who's here, that would be fabulous. It's just nice to know I'm not just talking to a camera. And it's also nice to know that you can actually hear me. So go ahead. You can just you don't have to fill out the form to create an account. You can just be anonymous, but in your anonymous, like you can see above, I'm anonymous 4915. I introduced myself and just put my name in my comment. So I'm going to start off by answering the questions that I have. And if you came today with more questions, fabulous. I want you to jump in and ask those. But I think this would be a great jumping off point. So again, I want to acknowledge that this first question today really is geared towards the next 3 weeks, but I'm going to try to touch on it and not fully answer it, because I think you're going to get the answers to your questions in the next few weeks, but I'm going to address it. So Pam wrote, what steps should we take when our child hits another child after it has become a recurring problem? So I'm assuming you're saying that the hitting is the recurring problem, not that something is that's leading to the hitting. That was number 1. Number 2 was, when a child has a meltdown or is frustrated, what is the next step for a preschooler after using identifying words like "I'm mad"? We're trying to work on helping him find a solution, but is 4 too young for that step? It isn't working. And then number 3 was, how can we get our partner on board? Sometimes it seems all the work I do is undone if my husband doesn't follow the same technique. I'm so glad. Those are all fabulous questions, and I'm going to try to touch on each of them. Like I said, you're going to find the answers in the next few weeks, but let me just give you a window into what is to come. So the first question was about steps we should take when our child hits another child and is becoming a recurring problem. So a little background information is helpful. So I don't know if you're here with us, Pam, but is this in a play group? Is this at the park? I think being clear about what the expectation is in that space is really important. So after the first time it happens, we set a clear limit. Hey, you know what? We can stay and play at the park, or we can stay and play with our friend, or we can stay at our friend's house if you can play gently or kindly or whatever language you use, or friendly or whatever it is you use. And that way, if they don't follow through, then we just get up and leave. We leave the park, we leave the play date, just say, oh, you know what, looks like you're having a hard time, and we'll come back and try another time. Or you know what, we'll have Susie over next week, no problem. It looks like maybe you're tired or you're hungry and just having a really hard time. Maybe it's hard for you to share your toys. I don't know what brings on some of this hitting, so it's kind of hard to answer. So I'm just kind of giving you some generalizations. But a few things that we'll talk about is being very clear. So I think setting expectations up front. If you know this is a recurring problem, address it before you go to the play date or you go to the park. Let them know that they can stay there as long as they like if they're doing A, B, and C. I would stay away from not using the words like not hitting because we're using the word hitting, which usually reinforces it. So focus on what you want them to be doing instead of what you don't want them to be doing. And you'll learn more about that next week. And then I love that you acknowledge that your child's only 4 and are they really capable? So as we talked about last week in child development, their brain is still very much under construction and they have limited impulse control. So many times they are reacting without thinking. Even though you may have told them 100 times, we don't hit when we're frustrated, we're angry, or want our toy back or whatever, they're impulsively going to respond. And they're very physical beings at this point, especially boys, and they communicate physically. So that is part of their repertoire right now. That doesn't make it okay. We can definitely step in, but we have to acknowledge that, you know, it's not that your child's being bad or they can't do anything other than hit, but it is usually a first reaction. So I think in that moment, and we're going to talk more about this, telling them what they can or do say. So giving them an opportunity to try again, whether it's try again, sharing that toy, or, hey, you know what, let's try again and keep our hands to ourselves this time, or whatever it is, giving them the opportunity to try again. Because if we don't, they're not going to be able to see what success looks and feel like. And we need to give them lots of practice for this. So just telling them what not to do and leaving is not going to be super helpful, because the likelihood is the next time they're at the park, the next time they get frustrated, the same thing's going to happen because they don't have any tools in their toolbox just yet. So we're building up their toolbox of managing their emotions and their behaviors. But with a 4-year-old, I wouldn't spend a lot of time talking about how the other child feels and why it's not okay. And, you know, our tendency is to talk a lot. And I would say try to limit the amount of, hi, Adrian, how you doing? I'm so glad you joined us. So limit the amount. And we're going to go into this in great detail. So just wanted to give you a few things to think about there. Then when a child has a meltdown or is frustrated, what is the next step for a preschooler after using identifying words like mad? We're trying to help him find a solution, but is 4 too young for that step? So once again, it depends what led to the big emotion or the behavior. I love that you're helping your child to identify how they're feeling, because I think identifying that feeling is very empowering for kids, because they're trying to show you they're mad through their actions and their behaviors, usually physically. And instead, once they have a word for it, they can control themselves a whole lot better. Now, young kids are more than happy, sad, or mad. There may be other things going on. So the frustration may still remain because I'm not mad, I'm frustrated, or I'm disappointed, or I'm jealous, or whatever, right? So maybe the opportunity here is to give your child a choice in how they're feeling. Are you frustrated or are you disappointed? Are you jealous or are you sad? So giving them, building this vocabulary by giving them some choices around they are feeling in that moment. One of the mistakes a lot of parents make, and I'm not saying that you do, but just noticing that they tell children how they're feeling. Oh, you are really mad right now. And maybe your child is mad, but nobody likes to be told how they feel. So being mindful that we help our child identify how they're feeling. Using the life feed is a reason to get back into the course. Well, I am so glad that you have jumped back in with us, Adrian. It's fantastic to have you again. Okay, so hopefully I addressed that a little bit. The next steps would be to do a little bit of problem solving, and the expectation isn't that your child comes up with how to solve that problem. And this is another place with really young kids where we might give some choices. Ideally, we can ask them, like, what's another way to get your toy back? Or what's another way to say you don't want to play with somebody? But we can also, I think, give them some choices. You can either say, no, thank you, or you can use your hand and say, stop, right? If your child's physical, sometimes using their body in a socially appropriate way is totally fine. It's a lot better than hitting or throwing sand in somebody's face. So I think brainstorming with them, you may have to give them some of these ideas. You don't want to directly tell them what to do because, once again, they don't like to be told what to do, and they're more likely to retain these ideas if they've helped to come up with them. So involving them in the solution. So we're going to talk more about this in great length in our last module on emotion coaching. It's all about problem solving. So I promise you, Pam, we are going to answer this at great length and give you tons of ideas. But just for right now, we're gonna start there. And there's a few other things we'll talk about next week in our first week on discipline that I think will be helpful for you as well. The last part of Pam's question was, how can we get our spouse on board? Seems like you're doing all the work and it's being undone by your partner. Well, I think there's a few things. I think sharing this information, all the information that you're getting from me, it's helpful when it's not coming from you and it's coming from me. So forward the workbook, forward the videos, forward your sign-in information, set a time to watch the videos together so it's not coming from you. And I have a lot of families in my private practice who are working really hard on their parenting, but they're kind of working in opposition, and really all we work on is how to be on the same page. And I think having the same language, having the same instructor really does make a difference. But you know what? Maybe they don't like watching videos, or they think my voice is annoying, which is totally fine. Send them your notes. Send them like I said, the workbook. Fill in the workbook as you go and forward it on to them. Much more likely that they're going to pick up on that. The other thing I want to acknowledge is you are modeling all of this for your partner. And if you are the primary caregiver, they're going to follow your lead a little bit. It won't be exactly the way you say it, exactly the way you do it, and nor should it be. But I think you'll see that you'll be more in alignment. Right? It's not going to happen overnight, but the more that you are consistent in using some of these practices, the more likely it is your partner's going to pick up on it. And if the information is coming from somebody else other than you, it's more likely that they're going to be open to it. So we obviously, just like with our kids, we can't make them do things. We can't make them be a certain way. The same is true with our partners. We can't make them parent a particular way. But what they'll see is that what they're doing isn't effective and they're not successful and they're getting frustrated. And if you're not anymore, they're going to pick up on what you're doing. So just keep focused, stay consistent, model. Don't coach your partner if they don't want coaching. Telling them what to do, just like with kids, they're going to resist. They're going to do the opposite. Even if they know you're more effective and what you're doing and saying is working, they're going to do the opposite if you tell them they should be doing this. So just being mindful of that. Okay, let's see. I see somebody else here besides Adrian, actually a few people, but I'm not sure who's here. So Pam, if you are with us right now, please follow up with more information or questions to follow up so I can make sure I clarify and answer everything for you. So I have another question here, and it says, you've described the importance of unstructured play to child development. For our 4-year-old child, is it important that such play happen by herself sometimes, Or is it important we always play with her? If the former, what suggestions can you offer about how to encourage her, at least occasionally, to strike out on her own and play by herself for a while? How long is reasonable to expect her to play by herself? So once again, another 4-year-old child. And the question is about how long can they play independently, and should they play independently, or should parents be constantly engaged in some of this unstructured play? So I would say maximum for a 4-year-old, generally, it's about 20 minutes, okay? There are 4-year-olds that can sustain play by themselves for an hour, but that's not typical. So I said typically about 20 minutes. Do you need to be engaged in her play all the time? No, you don't. And there are some kids that really actually want you to be there, especially if you work or maybe they're in school part-time, they don't see a lot of you. Yes, they're going to want you to be there, but they are capable of playing independently. And if you want to encourage that, I would start small. And I would start by engaging in the play, starting them off. So maybe you're building a Lego tower, or maybe you're getting out Barbies or doing a puzzle or whatever it is, coloring. Get them started, engage with them in the activity, and then slowly titrate yourself out. So maybe engage and do it with them, then maybe be present and not engaging in the activity, then maybe sitting across the room reading a magazine while they're engaging in the activity, and then slowly pulling yourself out of the room altogether so they can be playing independently and you're in the other room. So I think that's the easiest way to introduce it, especially if you have a child that is resistant to playing on their own. I think also acknowledging when there's a sibling, it's difficult to be playing independently when a parent is paying attention or caring for the other child. So, excuse me, I did not get enough sleep last night. Okay, so I hope that answers your question. It is not important that you always play with her. Obviously, we want to play with our kids because it's a great opportunity for us to learn about them and build our relationship with them and build their confidence. So we do want to stay engaged, but they are capable and should have some independent play. And what's interesting now in playing independently is as they get older, they're going to be able to have a longer attention span in the classroom because they've been able to sustain this focused attention all on their own without being engaged. Okay, so I think I answered all the pieces to that second question. Adrian, do you have any questions? I know you're popping in on this live. I don't know if you've been watching the videos leading up to today. As I mentioned earlier, we talked about ourselves, our partnerships, expressing needs and getting our needs met. We talked about child development, what's going on, why they're doing all these crazy things. I love that everybody jumped in and shared some crazy things that kids are doing, hitting and throwing and hurting cats and talking back and screaming, all of those things, throwing food, all very typical for this age group. Are you going to see this at 6 or 7? Probably not. Okay, so very typical. They are testing. They want to know what the limits are. They want to know that you're predictable and you're reliable, and it's their job. They're not doing it to drive you crazy. They're doing it because they are curious little beings. Okay, so if there isn't another question, I'm just going to talk a little bit for a minute or two about what is to come. So I have broken up discipline really into 3 weeks because there is a lot of information, and quite honestly, we should be covering the last 3 weeks over 6 weeks, but I know it's really hard to stay engaged for that long. So I'm giving you a lot, and I want to acknowledge that there is a lot to take on in the next few weeks. So with the new content that's coming out on Tuesday, I'd love for you to watch it. I'd love for you to call out what it is your action item is, what you are going to do. Thank you, Annette, for popping in for a few minutes. Please, if you have any questions, let me know. So I broke it down into 3 weeks, but there's a lot in there. So I encourage you to take 1 or 2 things to experiment with during this live course. And then I want you to go back and go through those 3 modules again and pick out new pieces to add to what you're doing, because there is a lot. And the feedback that I've gotten over the last few years is that they wish they had more time to cover all of this content. But when I have spread this out longer, people are less engaged. So I want to make sure I get everything in while I still have your attention. So we're going to start discipline. We're going to talk about the difference between discipline and punishment, because those 2 things are very different. Those words get used synonymously a lot, but they are very, very different. So we're going to get very clear on what we're doing and why we're doing it. It's going to make it a lot easier to use the tools and strategies when you understand it. You're not just like repeating it and parroting what somebody else thinks that you should be saying, because ideally you're going to be using your own language. And I'm going to give you lots of ideas on what language to use, so you don't have to get creative, but it's going to sound and look different for everybody. All right, so I just saw Adrian moved August and started acting out again. That's why I'm back. Yes, things are going to get better and worse, and there's going to be new challenges. Recently told me he misses his old classmates from preschool. Any insights to understand where his emotions? Yeah, I'm so glad you brought that up, because kids at this age, they love consistency. It gives them that feeling of safety and security. So those changes, transitions, and I know many of you have talked about transitions already being really challenging. You know, there's the transition from leaving the house in the morning to getting to school, or from dinner to bedtime, but there are huge transitions when kids change schools as well. And they take comfort in those relationships they know. But you know what? Is it great that he's had this experience and he's already aware of it, because he's going to have many transitions throughout his educational life. And these are opportunities to get comfortable with that, because there are going to be lots of uncomfortable things that happen in our kids' life. And one is changing schools. And that's just going to make it easier for kids to manage when there's really tough stuff that comes up. So I think that having a really challenging first 5 or 6 years of life is a great way to set up a child for future happiness and success. I know that sounds totally crazy and nobody wants it, but I promise you that the more that you work on some of these things now and kids experience this now, the better off they're going to be. I wrote a blog post a few weeks ago on the benefits of your child's failures. I don't know if you saw that on the Childproof Parenting blog. I think I also posted it on the Childproof Parenting website as well. But our kids need to get comfortable with discomfort, with failure. And that's how learning takes place. And that's how creativity blossoms, through taking risks, through messing up, because we're not going to figure out what works if we don't figure out what doesn't work first. So I think just being with him in those emotions and reflecting back, and we're going to talk more about this next week as we talk about using empathy as the parenting tool, but just reflecting back what you're hearing him say about his friends and talking about his friends. And we don't want to dismiss it, or you're fine, or look at your new friends. Like, it's really important for him to be in those emotions, because if we dismiss it, he's kind of going to get stuck there. He's not going to be able to move through those emotions. So I think just being there, listening and reflecting back what it is he's sharing with you. Or to get more info. Oh, okay. I think Adrienne, you meant questions. Yes, he's 4, almost 5. Yeah. To get more questions or more info out of him. He might just be responding to the feeling of sadness or loneliness. I don't know what his situation is. Yes, questions. Thank you for clarifying. that he's made. And, you know, I think luckily with today's technology, he still can be in touch with friends. You can FaceTime a friend. You can send pictures in the mail to one another. There's lots of ways to stay connected. I know some really young kids get connected to a particular friend or two, and they have a really hard time letting go. So I think it's helping him figure out ways, if he wants to stay connected with his friends, focusing on new friendships, and then just being with him in that state of sadness and loneliness and whatever it is he's experiencing. And he might not be able to go beyond that. He might not have that awareness, but I think just giving him the language to name his emotion is actually enough for somebody that's 4, almost 5 years old. So I hope that answers your question. This is tough because there's so little and they really don't have a lot of content to work with. They just know how they're feeling and how they're reacting to their feelings. So I think just being there and listening, which sometimes for us as parents is really hard because we want to talk it through, we want to know more, and sometimes just being there and empathizing is enough for them. They just want to be heard. They want to feel felt, and you being there to listen helps them to feel that way. All right, so Adrian, I think we worked through that question. If you have any others, I don't know if you've been following the content up until this point. And I also saw Annette jump in, and Annette, I don't think I saw any questions from you this week. So if you brought one, please let me know. Otherwise, it is Friday, and I actually have a child home from school today. She didn't have school, so I'm looking forward to spending more time with her. I had to cut our day together short because I had the Facebook Live a few hours ago, and then I'm here with you right now. So I'd love to get back to my daughter too. Okay, so once again, this next week is a big one. It's actually perfect timing with the holidays. You're probably going to be spending more time with your kids over the Thanksgiving holiday. So be sure to watch those videos as they come out. I think I'm going to open them up for Monday evening, so that way you have it ready and accessible to start focusing on discipline and how to respond and just some of the basics. I want to acknowledge there's not one right way, one only way to manage a big emotion or challenging behavior. So we are building your toolbox, a toolbox of 5 or 6 different responses. It's not going to be overwhelming, 20 different things to remember to say or do. It's going to be simple. The application is going to be hard. It's going to take a lot of practice. And all we're going to be doing is fine-tuning what you're already doing now. So it's just making small little tweaks to what you're saying you're doing now to make it much more effective and create the relationship that you want with your child, because it builds those feelings of mutual trust and respect. This week, though, I did post on Childproof Parenting, in case you're interested, a piece on timeouts. And that blog post is a great example of how making a small tweak to what you're already doing can make a big difference. Because I'm sure most of you at one time or another, or maybe even now, are using timeouts. And as you'll see next week when we talk about punishment and discipline, timeouts can easily be a punishment, but it also can be a form of discipline, a way of helping kids to manage their emotions, self-soothe, and get access to their rational brains. So thank you very much. I hope you have a wonderful weekend as well. Again, the next coaching call is coming up in 10 days. So I made it a little bit sooner, so that way as questions come up, I can answer them. We don't have to wait 2 weeks. So I've got that coming up on November 27th at 8 p.m. Pacific Standard Time. And the form is already in that section of your course. So please, as you're going through the content, just click on over to that box and fill in your questions as they come up. All right. Also know that you can be asking questions as we go along on the Facebook group. I know not everybody is in our private Facebook group. Not everybody has Facebook. Not everybody wants to be on Facebook. That's totally fine. I would say half of our students right now are on it and the other half aren't. Not a problem. You're not missing anything, except the engagement with other students and getting kind of daily responses from me. So know that I am there to answer those questions on Facebook, in the Facebook group. I'm here to answer them live, and I think it's much more effective when we are live, because then you can kind of fill in the blanks and I can give you a much better answer when I can get greater detail around what your concerns and questions are. All right, everybody, thank you so much for showing up today. I look forward to hearing about next week and what your thoughts are, what your questions are, and how things go with your kiddos. All right, take care and have a wonderful Thanksgiving. Bye, guys.